our final episode of 28 Days of Color presented by Steam Engine Academy. Today is episode 28, Color in Women. Today we'll talk about the great works and history of Cicely Tyson, followed by an interview with Cyntheny Walton, a former corrections officer for a girls' Juvenile Hall Detention Center. You don't want to miss this. Renowned actress Cicely Tyson has died. She was 96 years old. Her death was announced by Larry Thompson, her longtime manager, who did not specify the cause. In a career that spanned some 65 years, Tyson was an elegant, dignified presence on stage and screen. She commanded attention in such movies as Sounder and the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. She won Emmys and at age 88, a Tony Award. She also inspired generations of African American actors who grew up watching her. In an interview that aired recently, marking the publication of her memoir, Just As I Am, Tyson told NPR's Michelle Martin that as an actress, I learned that I could speak through other people. I was a very shy child. I was an observer. I never spoke, but I was a great observer. Cicely Tyson brought grace and gravitas to the roles she played. It was her eyes that spoke. They could sparkle in one scene and then pierce the soul in another. That is, she had range. In Sounder, she was a wife and mother in a family of black sharecroppers in Louisiana in the 1930s. The part called for Tyson to be tender with her family and to seethe when the town's white sheriff won't let her see her husband in jail. Critic Roger Ebert wrote that it was a wonder to see the subtleties in her performance. In 1972, Sounder was one of the first movies to show the strong bonds of a loving black family. Tyson once told NPR that it was also the movie that made her realize she needed to look for roles that reflected her experience as an African American woman. During a press conference for Sounder, a white journalist told her the movie made him aware of his own prejudice because, he said, he was surprised to hear African American children call their father daddy, just like his kids called him. He could not equate the fact that this man was on the same level as he, Tyson said, and really I admired him for standing up in an audience and saying that, and I thought to myself, Cicely, you really can't afford the luxury of just being an actress. Cicely Tyson was born in Harlem. Her parents were from the Caribbean. Her father was a carpenter and a painter. Her mother was a housekeeper who was deeply religious. In 2005, Tyson told NPR that their lives revolved around the church. We did everything in the church, she said. I played the organ, I played the piano. I taught Sunday school. I sang in the choir. And then on Monday, we had prayer meeting, and Tuesday, we had young people's meeting. Wednesday, we had old people's meeting. Saturday, we cleaned the church, and Sunday, we were right back in the church. My entire social life was in and about the church, and so that is the basis of my foundation. Cicely Tyson was also gorgeous. She started modeling after high school. Soon she was acting in movies and on TV. It was the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. New York was a place where black artists formed alliances. Tyson performed in shows with all-black casts alongside artists such as her friends Maya Angelou and James Earl Jones. One of Tyson's first roles was in the socially conscious but short-lived TV series East Side, West Side. Tyson played a poised, intelligent secretary in an office of social workers. Tyson's short afro hairstyle inspired other black women to wear their hair natural also. Tyson was on magazine covers like Ebony and Miss. She married jazz star Miles Davis. Photographers swooned over the famous couple. Cicely Tyson always looked for positive portrayals of black women. In 1974, she took on one of her most famous characters, the lead in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, a TV movie on CBS. With the help of a stunning makeup job, Tyson transformed herself to play the title role, a former slave and sharecropper. Tyson played Miss Pittman at various stages in her life. As a young adult, she's beaten up by Klansmen. Friends and family members are murdered. Tyson captured her weariness as well as her resilience. It was a rare event for a television network to broadcast a feature film about the brutal struggles of African Americans in prime time, especially from the point of view of African Americans. It was a performance that deeply inspired a young Viola Davis. She and her sisters watched the TV movie together in their family's rundown apartment in South Carolina. At an awards press conference in 2015, Davis said Tyson was a revelation. She was the first actress that I saw when I was 6 or 7 years old, where I saw a craft, Davis said, where I saw the magic of transformation. Viola Davis eventually got to share in that magic. In the TV series How to Get Away with Murder, Tyson played Davis's mother. Cicely Tyson used to say well into her 80s that she was still looking for one more great role to play. At age 88, she found it, playing Miss Carrie Watts in a Broadway revival of Horton Foote's The Trip to Bountiful, with an all-black cast. In one scene at the bus station, Tyson's character strikes up a conversation with another solo traveler. She would break into a hymn. Overcome with emotion, she would get up off the bench and start clapping. Sometimes the audience would join in. She was asked what was her secret for being so active into her 90s. Tyson said she took care of her body, but also that she simply loved life. She will be remembered for generations to come. Cicely Tyson. Welcome back to another episode of 28 Days of Color, presented by Steam Engine Academy. Today's topic is color and women, and we're here with Cyntheny Walton to talk about her experience in Juvenile Hall. How are you?
I'm good. I am blessed.
Good. Same here, staying safe and getting rid of this pandemic. So Tell me, how long were you working in the juvenile hall centers, and what made you want to pursue that field?
Well, I've worked in numerous juvenile halls, 3 or 4, but one in particular I worked in for about 10, 11 years. We housed girls and boys, and the youngest I saw was from 7 up to age 18. And I knew from day one that I wanted to work with juveniles. As a little girl, being in a house with a single parent, my mom did the best she could. I'm the 11th child. 2 of my brothers continually would get in trouble as juveniles and then graduated into the adult system. So I saw that, and I knew right off that I wanted to make a difference. I knew I wanted to work with kids, troubled kids.
Yeah.
You know, so it was I knew early on.
Oh, what an experience. And, what are some of the reasons that these children that you were working with, why were they detained?
Well, a lot of them would be detained for serious charges, but there was a large majority would just be detained for non-criminal offenses, believe it or not. These are called status offenses. And this is like your kids that commit truancy, they run away from home. And a lot of times, when they run away, instead of taking them back home to the parents, this is where the discretion of the police officer comes in play. Instead of taking them back home to their parents, Depending on the kid, the officers would bring them in to juvenile hall, and sometimes I would call the parents, but like I say, this is where the discretion comes in. And working in the juvenile system for probably about 15, 16 years total, I saw where, depending on what area I was working in, the officers would use their discretion negatively to affect the Black girls because they're already labeled as being aggressive, loud, non-compliant, and so they would 9 times out of 10 bring them to the juvenile facility.
And you're naming children as young as 7, and I'm just like taking that all in, and
pretty sad. Mm-hmm.
And even for the ones that are running away or not going to school, all the way up to the violent offenses, what do you think are some of the things that these children, the girls and the boys, what are they going through in their communities that is kind of setting out this path?
Just being labeled. They're already, let's start with that. They're already labeled, for an example, if they're at school and a fight break out, before the police officer even get there, he's already spoken to somebody at that school. They've already labeled the Black child as being the aggressor, bad attitude. So once the officer gets there, his mind is already made up, so that puts the child on the offensive, part of this. It's sad. And the school officials treat these kids, I have a background in education as well. I worked as a substitute teacher, so I got a chance to see that side of things too. And the Black kids are just automatically labeled as the troublemakers, the aggressors, and there's a lot to deal with in the community, like poverty and just racial discrimination and just so much bias and just, as a Black child has to be 3 times better than everybody else. There's no room for error. There is no room for mess up at all. And sometimes parents cannot afford to put their kids in sports. It's good to have your kids involved in things in the community, so they're not getting bored, so that they're not getting mixed up with the wrong kids, the wrong crowd. But parents cannot, you barely have money to put food on the table. Either you pay for sports or you pay your rent.
Right.
Or you pay for the water to be on. So sometimes we have to make those decisions.
Right.
And depending on the area you live in, there's no sports in these schools. So you got to go outside, and pay for karate or baseball, cheerleading, something like that, so.
And don't
let a hard situation.
Access is a whole nother discussion we could have on access to things. Let me tell you.
Yes.
We could take that one over the hill with us.
Exactly.
And you mentioned you've seen so many different aspects of it. You taught in the classroom. You see these children before they end up where they're in the juvenile hall with you. What are some of the things you would change in that juvenile hall system? I mean, we talked about what the police are doing, but what would you change in the juvenile hall that you think would, be better for the students in there, the children that are trying to kind of rehabilitate and get back home?
Well, honestly, I would bring in adults that started out in the juvenile system and that graduated to the adult system to talk to some of these kids, because bringing in people that have these degrees that only know through learning from a book and have not been to these neighborhoods, have not experienced any of this, sometimes that is a waste of time for some of these kids. That's not gonna always work. So that's one thing I would change. I would bring in more, I would bring in counselors to work with these kids that's been through trauma, instead of just bringing them in the juvenile hall, letting them do their 6 months, letting them do their time, and then releasing them. They need some type of structure while they're in there, not these little groups that they have the officers to run sometimes. They need to bring doctors in that know this area, to
That's
talk
not
to
really
these
a
kids.
thing.
All juvenile halls, all juvenile facilities don't give counseling to these kids. They have the officers to run, because I ran plenty of groups in these and I did the best I could, but it would have helped to have a doctor to run the group with me on a daily basis. Someone that's been to school, that have done the work, that could give a different perspective on things.
I mean, how often are you seeing some of these children leave and come back? Is there, a turnaround rate where you see them leave and then you see them in a few months?
Oh, yes. You could see them the same day, the following day, the next week. Frequent flyers is what some of us call them, frequent flyers. It's like being at home for some of these kids. The minute they get released, they come right back. A lot of times they feel safer in juvenile hall. It just depends what's going on. It's like a revolving door, and now you're seeing more girls over, the past 15 years, you see more girls coming in, young girls coming in, some with mental problems within the household, gang activity. It's sad, truancy, when I first started in the early 90s, I saw more boys. But as time went on, I started seeing more girls. Some of them I would talk to the way I would talk to my nieces or my children, and they would come back years later. I've had plenty that come back 5 years later. They're married, they're in college, they got their act together. Officer Walton, you made a difference in my life. It makes you feel so good when you reach just one, to come back and say, hey, thank you for being so hard on me. I was hard, but fair, consistent, straight to the point. Because sometimes that's what they really want. They don't want adults to always be their friend. And that's what some of these parents try to be these kids' friends. And No, that's not always the route to go.
No. And you were mentioning that some of those children come back and they're grown and have gone to college. What are some of the things that are out there for them as a resource when they leave?
Well, you have intensive supervision. The probation officers go out to the homes. You have, the ankle monitoring, the urine test, some counseling. Probation officers go to the schools and check on them. It's like a village of people that work with these kids when they get out. You have the parents, you have the step parents, you have school officials, mental health, you have CPS, you have all these people working. It just takes a village, is what my mom used to say. It takes a village to raise these kids, because you got single parents doing the best they can. They have to go to work. There's nobody really watching these kids. They get into trouble. They come into juvenile hall, and once they get released, most facilities do the best they can with, the resources, but the probation officer will help them with that.
Yeah.
So there's a meeting with the parents prior to the juvenile being released.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, once they get out of there, it's nice that they have those things kind of in place to kind of guide them and bump them back into the right path. Like, no, let's stay on track. But
right.
Then too, it seems like there's, even something, of course, more in the home that we can do and efforts that we can make. As a single parent myself, I know how busy things can get,
Right.
But what are some suggestions that you would have for these parents that maybe have a child now that is kind of on a turbulent path?
Know your kid. Talk to your kid. Active listening, it works. Active listening, just have that open door policy, with your kid, and know who your kid is hanging around.
Yeah.
Just no parent is perfect.
Right.
But we strive to be, and, just know who you're leaving your kid with.
Right.
Because that opens up a whole nother can of worms right there. These parents, they got to go to work. They're leaving their kids with all these different people that can harm them. And then they start acting out. Maybe something happened, that's why you need to have that open door policy. Try to have them in sports. Sometimes you can find free things, online. Maybe there's a good neighbor that you could, count on. Maybe the parent need to look inside and make sure their priorities are in order. Because I spent 12 years on the night shift, okay, so that I could be there during the day if something came up with my kid. If I had to go up to the school, I was that type of parent. I'm working this night shift, I'm going up to this school, I'm talking with the counselor. No, I'm gonna be up there. I'm not gonna wait for you guys to call me for nothing. I'm gonna be up there talking to the counselor, getting to know these people. I want them to know what type of parent I am.
Yeah.
Too. So
if those teachers don't know, if they don't know your name, it's like you need to be on their mind. They need to know that name.
Yes.
And if anything comes up, they need to know that person will expect a phone call.
Exactly. And they knew me. They knew my name.
I believe that
They
wholeheartedly.
knew my children. They knew.
Mhm.
So that worked out real good.
Good. And wrapping things up, I just kind of want to take a minute to let you have the floor. Is there any other message you want to send to our viewers, our parents, our students before we go?
People, it takes a village. Sometimes we don't want anybody saying anything to our kids. When I was growing up, the neighbor could, if the neighbor saw me doing something wrong, they could, tell me, Cynthia, don't do that or whatever, But these days, when you try to talk to some parents, the first thing they ask the adult is, what did you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you have to have an open mind, because everybody that approach you about your kid is not out to harm your kid.
Right. Right.
Okay. But yeah, I switched over to the adult system for 7 years, but I missed working with juveniles. I missed it. And even when I wasn't at work, my home was the place where everybody dropped their kids off at. My husband and I, we've raised other people's kids because we truly believe that it takes a village to raise these kids. So we helped with our nieces and nephews and friends that we went to high school with, whoever we could possibly help. We did. We enjoyed it. And sometimes I miss it.
Yeah. I commend you on all the amazing work that you've done with these children, and I commend you on your strength and kind of having to endure the things that you must have seen over these years.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, even if one person can be affected in a positive,
yes,
it's just worth it.
Yes.
And so
yes.
I appreciated hearing this story, and I hope the parents and the students really get something out of this and can be mindful about our village, whether
Yes,
it's
it's
a
a
good
village.
village, a strong village or not. We need to make sure that our village is there and that it's a good one.
Exactly.
And as a Black community, we should be a village for each other.
Yes, we should. We need to stick together more.
We do.
We help other people. We need to, help each other as well. We really do.
Agreed. Thank you so much for being here, Miss Cyntheny, and I look forward to chatting with you more about this. There's a lot of insight.
Anytime. Anytime. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Today's reading is a powerful one. It's called Something Happened in Our Town, a children's story about racial injustice. It was written by Marian Solano, Marietta Collins, and Ann Hazard, illustrated by Jennifer Zavoyne. Find out how children process with their family a major event that takes place in their neighborhood. Take care. Something happened in our town. Something bad happened in our town. The news was on the TV, the radio, and the internet. The grown-ups didn't think the kids knew about it, but the kids in Miss Garcia's class heard some other kids talking about it, and they had questions. After school, Emma asked her mother, "Why did the police shoot that man?" "It was a mistake," said her mother. "I feel sad for the man and his family." "Yes, the police thought he had a gun," said the father. "It wasn't a mistake," said her sister Liz. "The cops shot him because he was black." Emma was confused. "He's brown, not black," she said. "Some black people have dark brown skin, and some have light brown skin," Emma's father explained. Black usually means African American. Most of their ancestors were brought here from Africa as slaves. I know what a slave is, said Emma. That's when you have to do whatever the other person says. Yes, slaves had to do whatever white people told them to do. Even after slavery ended, white people didn't let black people live where they wanted to, go to school with white people, or vote. Who are white people? White people came here from places in Europe or Russia or other countries. We are white, even though our skin is light tan. Did our family do those bad things a long time ago? Asked Emma. Yes, answered her mother. Back then, many white people thought that they were better than black people, even though it wasn't true. Liz added, some white people still think most black men and boys are dangerous, even though they're not. Was the man that got shot dangerous? Asked Emma. No, her mother said. Shooting him was a mistake. It was a mistake that is part of a pattern. Like the pattern on my blanket? Emma asked. Yes, but this pattern is being nice to white people and mean to black people. It's an unfair pattern. Suppose you had a party and invited everyone in your class except the black kids, her mother said. How would the black kids feel? They would be sad, Emma said, or mad. And you would be missing out because you never know who is going to be your best friend, said Liz. And you can help others to be fair, said her mother. Like telling Anna to stop teasing Ling about her name? Asked Emma. Her mother gave her a hug. Yes, just like that. In another house, Josh asked his mother, can police go to jail? Yes, said his mother. Why do you ask? That white policeman who shot the black man, said Josh. Will he go to jail? What he did was wrong, said his mother. But he won't go to jail, said his father. Why not? Asked Josh. Cops stick up for each other, said Josh's brother Malcolm, and they don't like black men. Josh was confused. Why not? Some police are black. You're right, said his mother. Uncle James is a police officer, and so is my friend Kenya. There are many cops, black and white, who make good choices, said his father. But we can't always count on them to do what's right. Malcolm added, I could get stopped by the police just because I'm black, even if I don't do anything wrong. That's not fair, Josh said. What if it was a white man in the car? Would the police have shot him? They probably wouldn't have even stopped the car, said his father. Sometimes white people are treated better than black people. But it's not right. Everybody should be treated fairly. Josh's mother gave him a hug. We're proud of who we are. Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela were strong and brave black leaders. They showed us that we can stand up for our rights and set good examples for others. They were treated unfairly, but helped others to learn to be more fair. Some people haven't learned yet, said his father angrily. Why are you mad? Asked Josh. I'm mad because we're still treated poorly sometimes, but I can use my anger to make things better, said his father. Black people have a lot of power if we work together to make changes. I have power, Josh said, and I'm smart. His father smiled. You're right. His mother added, and you can change people's hearts by sticking up for someone who is not treated fairly. Like how Malcolm sticks up for me when the kids tease me about my glasses? Josh asked. He tells them to step off. Just like that, his parents said. The next day, a new kid joined Emma and Josh's class. His name was Omad, and he was from a country far away. Omad didn't know where to sit or what to do because it was his first day of school. He talked a little bit, but it was hard to understand him. He said he was learning English. After lunch, the class went outside to play soccer. Daniel and Sophia picked kids to be on their teams. All of the kids were picked to be on a team except Ahmad. Daniel said Ahmad probably didn't know how to play because he was new. Sophia said Ahmad might not be good at soccer. Josh remembered what his mother said about sticking up for people who are treated unfairly. Emma remembered what her mother said about unfair patterns and birthday parties. All of a sudden, Ahmad was not alone. Emma and Josh were leading him to their team. "We have enough kids on our team," Daniel said. "We don't need him." But Josh was ready. "Step off," he said. "He's playing." "Yeah," said Emma. "We don't want to miss out." And just like that, Emma and Josh gained a new friend and started a better pattern in their school. The end.
One more again. Mas não. Mas não. Mas não. Na viagem. Espesso. Na viagem. Espesso. Mas não vou sem te chamar na viagem. Espesso na viagem. Espesso na viagem. Espesso na viagem. Espesso mas não vou sem te chamar.